Welcome to Vantage Points. I'm Hisham Maligi. Starting tonight and through election night, I'm going to be live streaming from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern every night. On election night, we might extend it until, who knows, until California polls close. So join us at this time, 8 p.m. Eastern, which is 5 p.m. Pacific, which is 7 p.m. Central, every night from now until through election night. We're going to have many guests, activists, leaders, community leaders, and the big thing that I'm starting new and I'm testing it, I'm going to try as we go. If I see comments coming in from YouTube and Facebook, where we are broadcasting live, I might bring in that person if they would like to appear live on the show itself to ask their question or make their comment and maybe have a short discussion. So the sky is the limit. Join us, but do me a big favor. I seldom ask. Just subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook page, and share. This is how we grow. This is how we do it together. This is a community-based show. All right. So tonight I will have my brother, Davi Barker. I'm going to bring him in the studio and introduce him to you. Davi, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, great.
It's not the best, but hey, we'll.
My bunker has been condemned due to mold. I threw the studio together in about an hour. Obviously, I need some light, but yes. It will improve over time.
It will, and I really want to thank you because this idea came to me like this weekend. Like I wasn't planning this, and I myself, but I have the setup ready. So I thank you for accepting to come on in this short time and scrambling. I know you didn't find the camera, and you had to put a background and the whole spiel. So again, thank you very much. So how I know Davi is, we are both two of the four original co-founders of Muslims for Liberty. And that's how we met initially. But Davi is a very talented graphic artist and novelist and an author and so much so, like, I want you, Davi, to introduce yourself for those who do not know you in the community. So go ahead.
So obviously Muslims for Liberty is where a lot of people will know me from. My first published book was Voluntary Islam, which sort of codified my thinking on the connections between Islam and libertarianism. Since then, I've focused on fiction, and I write a series called Survivor Max, which is zombie stuff. It's a trilogy about a 15-year-old in the zombie apocalypse, which ironically or coincidentally anyway, was based on a coronavirus. So I was uniquely poised to know how coronaviruses work before this pandemic occurred. I'm a writer and artist. I do graphic design for a number of select clientele. And, what do they call it? A connoisseur of the gig economy.
This is awesome, David. Thank you very much. And we will get to talk about the coronavirus and your experience and, what happened so far. But let's first frame tonight's episode. So we didn't have a plan. I just told you, can you come tonight? And you said,
I don't even know the topic.
There's no topic. It's basically, we have the election in 9 days. And we want to discuss issues that are important to us and to hopefully many of the viewers. So let's.
Well, I have watched the debates. I've been following it pretty closely. Okay. And
you're a champ. I lasted half an hour for the first debate, and that's it. That was it for me.
You didn't miss very much. Not a lot of content was produced.
Right. I watched a summary YouTube video of 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be the same after that.
Well, it was sort of typical mudslinging, right? It was not a lot of substance. It was not a lot of specifics. It was a lot of people it's like someone said, either way, we get the oldest president America has ever had. And so
Yes.
like it really feels like the trend right now in America, as for the last few election cycles, has been like, whose grumpy old grandfather can we put in charge?
Right.
And so, you know, they're trying to get themselves one-liners and zingers with references that nobody under 60 gets. They're still saying malarkey. They're still saying
yeah, what the hell is malarkey?
it's, you know, if it's too bad that this is the most important thing going on in the world.
Right. Right. It's really unfortunate. So, in your view, if you developed a vision, what would be the top issues for this year's elections?
Oh man. Well, I mean, pandemic response is obviously going to be important. I have a feeling we're going to be sitting on either, you know, the current state of affairs or the ramifications of the way it's been conducted so far is going to go well into the next administration. So both the health and economic ramifications of that are going to stick with us for a long time.
Okay.
Which means we're going to be dealing with mass evictions, which means we're going to be dealing with mass unemployment, which means we're going to be dealing with depression, which means that we're going to be dealing with all of these like side effects of what's going on, which also means mass unrest, which we've already seen and will probably see more of.
Can you say more about what unrest, comes to?
Sure. Well, I'm kind of not a veteran in the military sense, but I'm a longtime observer of this phenomenon, both in the Tea Party and the Occupy movement. I was on the ground in both movements. I'm always into what the population is passionate about, just as an investigative journalist. Like that's where my interest lies, even if I don't agree with the crowd. But what's interesting about right now is that although the issues are still largely the same, right now police reform is taking center stage. Right now we also have all of these people who are going stir crazy from being locked up. They're unemployed from the side effects of the pandemic and the economic downturn. And so for the first time, we have protests where there's really nowhere for the energy to go. And we also have a president who is willing to marshal federal forces against his own civilians in unprecedented ways. And so that's kind of terrifying. I don't know where we go from here. I don't know how much more it can escalate. It's been pretty brutal, but it's also been it's been a circus. It's been both. It's been extremists on both sides of the political spectrum taking to the street and retaliating against one another. And I know that that's not the main body. I know that the main body of the Black Lives Matter movement has legitimate criticisms that I support and I share. But there's an ugliness in the country that I think started not just with the pandemic, but with the election of Donald Trump. That it's like the spirit of the nation has followed its leader, and the leader has dragged a whole portion of the country into a kind of madness. And that's really disconcerting because I don't know how much more it can escalate.
Right. Okay. So do you buy the, I hear about chatter in the media and within people pick up what the media says and repeat it. So basically they say there could be violence and all this stuff. Do you buy this argument? Do you think there can be violence or widespread or dangerous or out of the normal?
As far as the election is concerned, the election results, well, I hope not. I certainly hope not. And I think that the surest way to not have violence or to minimize violent response after the election is for Biden to win in as powerful a landslide as possible so that the results are not disputable. Because Donald Trump has poised himself, and that's not an endorsement of Biden, mind you. I'm just talking about the weeks that follow the election and the potential backlash from either political side at the civilian level. Donald Trump has poised himself to not accept the results, and he's essentially primed his following to not accept the results and to make accusations of fraud. And so, like, a lot of Donald Trump supporters are real low-income voters. They don't necessarily like delve intellectually into the issues very deeply, or even fact check their own opinions very carefully.
Right.
And so my concern is that regardless of what the results are, they're going to cry foul because whatever conspiracy website they frequent is going to cry foul, and you're going to get a lot of decentralized street level outrage and violence and property damage and hate crimes and who knows, you know what I mean? I don't honestly think that the institutions of this country would support the president if he decided not to acknowledge the results. Like, right. I don't think that the Secret Service would back him up if he was voted out. I don't think that the FBI would back him up if he was voted out. But I think that his street level, like Netroots online following, the QAnon crowd are clearly unhinged. So that's what I'm afraid of.
Tell me about those QAnon. Do you
have man.
history? Like, what's up with those guys? How did they start, and what's it about?
I'm a fan of conspiracies, okay? Like, I'm an old school, like, Robert Anton Wilson, Illuminatus trilogy conspiracy theorist, right? Okay. It's what got me into the Federal Reserve stuff. It's what got me into the 9/11 truth stuff. Like, I enjoy a well-crafted conspiracy theorist. I remain agnostic most of the time on whether or not they're true, but this one makes no sense to me whatsoever. Okay. First off, it's hard to even get to the bottom of, because it's like every person in the movement speaks like a rambling 90s website. And so getting straight answers about anything is really difficult. But from what I've been able to piece together is that this QAnon, is supposedly this person in the Trump administration with high-level clearance who's been leaking documents to the internet, claiming that the Donald Trump administration is conducting the secret war on satanic pedophiles embedded in the Democratic Party, who are, engaging in child trafficking and child sacrifice, and that all of his weirdness is actually coded messages to say that there's going to be these mass arrests of every corrupt person in politics, and it never happens. They keep promising, like, today's the day, and it never happens. Right. And so, like, to that extent, it has the feeling of an apocalypse cult, right? Like, that when somebody says the day of judgment is tomorrow, and it doesn't happen, they say, no, I did the numbers wrong. It's next week. Like, it has that kind of fervor to it.
So is it connected to the Pizzagate thing?
Yeah, that's a part of it. And, Jeffrey Epstein stuff, and all of it gets sucked into it. Like, I have no doubt that there are pedophile rings in Washington, D.C. Right. I just also have no doubt that Donald Trump is a part of them. So, that Donald Trump is on Epstein's flight list. Donald Trump has a history of going into the Miss America pageant backstage and talking about the naked bodies of underage girls. Like Donald Trump, if there's a pedophile ring in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump is part of it. No. So I don't believe that, like, there's a deification of him, the way that evangelicals like to deify their political candidates, that makes him into this superhero that's going to, like, rescue all of the children. And that's the part of it that's fantasy. Right. Like, he's not a real Christian. I mean, I don't want to speak to a person's heart, but if anybody seemed like a hypocrite, it's Donald Trump.
Right. You can see through it in a minute.
Yeah, like, he holds a Bible the way vampires hold Bibles.
Yeah, I imagine so. So I don't know. Like, okay. So first, let's put this out now. What is your estimate of, let's say, fair and like smooth elections? Who would win today? Oh,
well, I mean, all the polls suggest that Biden is winning by a landslide. I just saw something that said he was up 10 to 15 points, which is like unprecedented at this point in any election in U.S. history, that anybody is that high up in the polls. But of course, Donald Trump has secret polls that say that he's ahead, right? Which is like, so he's poisoning himself and his followers not to accept even a landslide. The problem is that this election is unprecedented in a number of other ways. We're going to have more mail-in ballots than ever in any previous election, which means we're probably not actually going to have election results on election night, because all of these ballots need to come in and they all need to be certified and they all need to be counted. And this process is going to be a lot longer and more time consuming because of pandemic concerns. So it's a really kind of strange perfect storm of unprecedented things in U.S. elections.
Right. So we'll continue, but I have a comment here from YouTube. Maria Bell says, Salam, no, the best way to prevent the violence is to have the leaders of the protest movements pledge that the groups won't participate. Have you heard?
Sure.
Yeah. Did you hear anything from any groups?
No, but I mean, that is sort of the same thing. Like, I'm talking about Donald Trump, and there was this weird gaffe where he told the Proud Boys to stand by instead of stand down, which was like, who knows if that's deliberate or not. That kind of sounded like a gaffe. But like, yeah, if there were groups like the Proud Boys or groups like, I don't know, Black Lives Matter or any groups on the other side, Antifa, for example, Antifa would be more likely to be out in the street wrecking stuff than Black Lives Matter, I think. Yeah, any organization can say that they're not going to participate, but like, that's not their job. Like, it's the president's job as the like leader of the country to diminish these tensions, to speak to the nation as a whole, to say that this is unacceptable and we're going to continue he should be legitimating the democratic process, because that's literally the seat that he's in. Whereas, like, yeah, okay, I pledge that I will not be engaged in any post-election violence. There, I reduce the level of violence that will follow the election.
Right.
But like, I'm one person, and the leaders of these organizations are at most the leaders of a small group of their local area. You know, like, we can all say we don't want this violence to occur, but I mean, you know, from all the work that we've seen, that hate crimes are often perpetrated by individuals. Right. And, you know, not every individual is going to pledge not to do something. Right.
And he ran on the slogan of draining the swamp, but the swamp only expanded over his years.
Yeah, it's just his swamp now.
Right.
Like, I keep hearing that he keeps in all of his speeches boasting about the medicines that he took for his COVID diagnosis, and then I find out that he's invested in those companies. So he's running an infomercial. He's running an infomercial for the treatment that he thinks. Like
it's like the movie The Joker, basically.
Yeah, that's the swamp. When your politician is running commercials for his companies from, I was going to say the pulpit. What's it called? The podium. Like, that's the swamp. That's the kind of corruption that people, for some reason, thought that Trump wouldn't be a part of. But he's always been a part of it. He's just the business end of this relationship. He hasn't until now been the politician end of this relationship.
Right. I want to tackle the topic and the issue, the whatchamacallit, the thing that is called the deep state. What is your information? What is define the deep state?
This is one of these terms like conspiracy theory and the swamp and Pizzagate and these other things. As I understand it, the deep state is that population of bureaucrats and people who are not elected, but they're appointed and they're in the government and they run the government, and we don't necessarily know who they are because they've been appointed over years and they have lifelong appointments, and maybe they're lobbyists, or maybe they're even political strategists. They're like the people who have the the cultural power inside the culture of government. And so they're institutions not on paper, but in influence.
Right. So, do you remember Eisenhower's farewell address?
Yeah, the
When he spoke about
military-industrial complex.
the military-industrial complex. So, could that be part of it at least?
Sure. I mean, certainly Halliburton, certainly, what is the Raytheon? Like these sort of corporations are part of the deep state. Their ability to lobby for candidates that, like, they might support a candidate on the left and on the right, and those two candidates will fight over the issues that the people care about, like gay marriage or police reform or whatever. But in reality, both candidates are pro Raytheon. Right? That's the way the deep state operates, is that they present you a false choice so that they control both sides of the disagreement.
I don't remember if it was Noam Chomsky, but I'm paraphrasing what that person said. It's basically there is a limited amount of topics to debate, that you debate them vigorously to give the impression that there is a lot of debate and a lot of issues, but in fact, it's just a few, maybe non-essential.
Maybe a dozen, right? And they're not even really essential. Like if you want to, like this is why your question was sort of strange. What are the most important issues coming forward? Well, most of them are not the ones anyone is talking about, because the important issues are things like the military-industrial complex and things like the Federal Reserve and things that are long-standing institutions that are just utterly broken in our society and nobody knows how to fix them. So no party is ever going to really discuss them as a campaign platform. And instead they find these small issues for us to argue about.
So let us go ahead and discuss some of these issues. This is the Federal Reserve, for example. What is the story? Because there are people who are hell-bent that if you mention the name the Federal Reserve, like if you mention what happened on 9/11, you're automatically a tinfoil hat, conspiracy theories, this and that. What is a sensible approach to the issue of the Federal Reserve?
I mean, I don't know at this point. I guess they call this the Overton window, right? The Overton window is that narrow group of things that we're allowed to discuss in public discourse, and outside the Overton window are the things that we're not allowed to discuss, or the things that put you on the fringe if you do discuss. I'm still in the camp of we shouldn't have a central bank. We shouldn't have a Federal Reserve. We should have either a standard commodity-backed currency or a series of competing currencies that are non-government currencies like Bitcoin or Liberty Dollar or something like that. Like I don't believe that a fiat-based, debt-based currency is a good thing for any economy. And we're even admitting that. They're admitting that in these debates when they talk about there was something where Trump and Biden were arguing about China and what did China do wrong. And one of the things that they said that they did wrong was they inflated their currency to pay for something to do with the whatever. They paid for things with stimulus money and debasing the currency through quantitative easing. That's the thing. Well, they're admitting that it's wrong when another country does it. They're admitting that it's bad economic policy when another country does it, but they don't admit that is precisely what our currency has been based on since 1913. And
okay. So let me stop you for a second. But one of the purposes of this show, and you've been part of it from the get-go, and you're the designer of that amazing logo. We'll get to this later. But one of the purposes is to educate the audience about different topics. I'm not sure that the audience is that familiar with some of the terminology that you're using. So what is fiat currency? Why is it bad? And how are we in the United States handling it?
Sure. So this was the political topic of the Tea Party in 2008 and the Ron Paul movement in 2008. And for me, it has been a central point of my political awakening probably since about 2004. And it's just like, what is money? How does it come about? And how does it work in this country? And what fiat money means is that the money is not valuable because it's backed by anything. The money is valuable by fiat, which means by decree. So it's saying that the money is valuable because the government orders you to take it. And that's what legal tender laws are. Is they're laws that obligate you to take the money that the Federal Reserve and the Treasury print. And it's in that sense absolved of market influences, the way that gold and silver would be, the way that Bitcoin would be, or any other commodity, barley, use barley, it doesn't matter. Like every other commodity in the marketplace fluctuates based on supply and demand. And they imagine that by decree, they can absolve these paper certificates of the influences of supply and demand. And because they think that, they increase the supply. That's what quantitative easing is. That's what stimulus packages are, is they're pumping money into the money supply so that people can go out and spend it on things. But what they don't realize, or what they probably do realize, because this is what inflation is that when you increase the supply, when you increase the money supply, the buying power of each individual certificate goes down. It's like watering down the economy so that the money in the economy is less potent and purchases less things, which means that if you're on a fixed income, if you're on Social Security, if you're on minimum wage, if for any reason you are not in control of your income, which is the vast majority of Americans, like you think you're fighting for a minimum wage, which is like great, fight for whatever wage you think is justified. But on top of that number, if that number stagnates, your purchasing power decreases over time. So even if you've been making, $15, $30 an hour for the last 5 years and your wage hasn't changed, the actual stuff you can buy with that wage has gone down. And that's a really nefarious process that's baked into our banking system. It's what our banking system was designed to do, was so that people who hold their wealth in commodities, in the stock market, in Wall Street, they experience inflation going one way, while people who have their wealth mostly in the form of fiat currency, mostly in the form of savings accounts or money under the mattress or whatever, people who are reliant on the paper money as opposed to the stocks and bonds and investment class people, their purchasing power is constantly going down. And it's like this weird secret tax that nobody talks about and nobody understands. And it doesn't have a good historical record. Most countries do not have the fiscal discipline to keep a fiat currency from collapsing for very long. And so they experience hyperinflation. The government begins spending money it doesn't have. And before long, a cat comes in and starts getting in the way of the camera. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Okay,
so this is in a sense, you can talk about this in the short term. Every time they talk about raising the debt ceiling and whether or not Congress is going to raise the debt ceiling, that's a short-term discussion. Essentially, at the local level or at the personal level, you could imagine that's like asking you, hey, you have a credit limit. Would you vote to raise your credit limit? Understanding that you never have to pay it back and you can spend it on whatever you want and you can buy votes with it and you can bribe constituents with it. But long term, we're looking at the decline of the purchasing power of the dollar since the institution of the Federal Reserve in 1913.
Right.
And at the time, the example we always used is the silver dime. That if you look at the silver dimes of 1913, you could buy a gallon of gasoline for 10 cents. You could, and I went through all these commodities that were 10 cents at the time when dimes were made of silver, when the currency was based on silver. That amount of silver still buys a gallon of gasoline. That amount of silver still buys however many chickens or however many whatever. So the commodity value is still there if you still had a commodity currency that follows the price of commodities. But because it's a fiat currency, it goes down and down and down and down and down. And so we experience what looks like price inflation when really it's the devaluation of the currency.
And it's there is many websites and economic groups that put the current value, actual value of the dollar at 4 cents compared to 1913.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Right. So before we continue, a comment on YouTube from Muhammad Masoud. Salam, I think it's people's nature to have a knee-jerk reaction whenever you introduce an idea that goes against their idea of reality. That's why everyone is labeled a tinfoil hat. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you, Muhammad, and thank you, Maria, for your comments. And people and viewers, you can just comment and ask questions as we go, and we'll put them on the screen. And if you would like to come on, like to be with us right here in studio, just indicate so, and I'll give you the link to do so. All right.
So, yeah, in conspiracy theory circles, we used to call that a reality tunnel. That there's like greater reality, which is big, and you only perceive about 3% of it.
Mhm.
And then there's your reality tunnel, which is all the things that you think are real. And so when you see things outside, you start piecing them into little boxes of things that you think are real, and that becomes your perception of what's in front of you and your interpretation of what's in front of you. So people who are in radically different reality tunnels, right, like flat earthers, they
Mhm.
can look at the same evidence that a round earther looks at, but it looks different to them because their filter is so different. And so yeah, when you start presenting people with contradictions in their filter, which is what most of us think reality, what most of us think is reality, is actually our own filter. um, it gets really uncomfortable because it means that we've been perceiving things incorrectly, or at least interpreting things incorrectly, which
Right.
means potentially been behaving incorrectly.
Right. Right. Okay, so you're watching Vantage Points with Hisham and Maligi. Thank you for joining us. We will be doing a live show, live stream nightly, every night from now through election night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Join us every night, ask questions, and post comments, and we can bring you on the show to be with us, like Davi is with us right now, to ask you a question or make your comment and have a short discussion about it. So this is something that we will continue doing through the election night. And actually, election night might be from 8 until California announces the results. So we'll see. Wish me luck, because I don't. I'm unable to stay up that late anymore. I'm getting old. But anyway, so let me regarding the fiat currency. So now the dollar is not backed currently by a
Mhm.
tangible item of value. It's basically a political decision to value the currency at a certain level.
Yeah.
And when they print more money, and that's basically what the Federal Reserve is. It's a printing press for this paper bill that we call the dollar. I mean, that's a very crude summary,
Yeah.
or
It's mostly digital now. They say most money isn't even printed anymore.
right,
What it means is that the value of the thing becomes very intangible. It becomes unclear where this ability of the purchasing power comes from. Does it come from Congress's willingness to raise the debt ceiling? And if so, are we destabilizing the currency by electing certain people? Or does the stability of the currency come from China's willingness to honor its debt? In which case, does it become unstable the moment China decides it's unstable?
right,
The actual seat of the stability of the currency becomes unknown because it's this weird nebulous thing now.
right. And it is known that China is the largest owner, or like holder, of U.S. Treasury
Mhm.
notes, which means if China decides to dump those in the market on a certain day, the
Yeah,
dollar will collapse instantaneously.
it's a
And there's
legitimate national security threat. like
definitely,
like that's not a joke. Like that's a serious concern. And it's not like it's a serious concern based on whether or not we get along with this administration in China. It's like that is a thing that is being held over our head until it's like an economic bubble. It has to pop eventually.
right,
And so the question is, will it pop in our generation, or will it pop in our children's generation or their children's generation?
right.
But it will pop.
Until the
So
powers that be decide to reset the system somehow and start a new way,
yeah.
which happened before many times. But for the people, lay people, the summary of what we have been talking about in the past few minutes is that even if you're getting the same amount of money every year in income, salary, stocks, whatever it is, that money that you think, let's say $1,000, it can buy certain things 2 years ago that it buy less of those today because the value of the money decreased based on the inflation and printing more. It's like you have a pot of soup and you keep adding water to the soup, so you devalue the quality and the thickness or whatever, the value of the soup itself.
So you still get a bowl of soup every day, but the soup you had last week had way more nutrients in it.
Exactly. So you get more and more weaker every time.
Yeah.
So that's in summary. And here's the thing, no candidate is talking about that. I don't even think the Libertarian candidate is talking about that.
No. Jo Jorgensen is the Libertarian candidate, and she's been saying this weird thing that I don't understand. When she was asked her position on the Federal Reserve, she says, my position is to audit it and then abolish it. And I'm like, why audit it?
Yeah,
that just sounds like you're trying to use both bumper stickers.
Right.
like that's not a coherent position.
Right.
And it's like if you're already certain you want to abolish it, there's no point in auditing it.
Right. You already know the answer. Right. So I stumbled upon this piece. The website is 270-win, WIN.com. So 270-win.com, meaning the electoral votes.
Sure.
And this piece was about how the allocation of electoral votes work in the United States currently. You have two states, Nebraska and Maine, that allocate the electoral votes proportionally based on how the candidate does in Maine and Nebraska. So let's say Biden gets 55% and Trump 45% in Maine. So the electoral votes would be divided as such, 55% Biden, 45 Trump. The 48 other states have the winner takes all.
Yeah.
So if Biden has one more vote than Trump, he gets the entirety of the electoral vote. So anyway, so they did a short study about how if we allocate all electoral votes proportionally or based on proportionally across the state or proportionally across congressional districts. And they did several different studies for 2016. I was really stunned that none of the ways that the reallocation of the electoral votes ended up in Hillary winning. Some of them ended up in giving Trump more electoral votes.
Okay, so this is like simulating essentially what would happen if the Electoral College wasn't there?
If the allocation
is still changed. Electoral College, so yeah, okay.
Right. So because the Constitution does not say how to allocate the votes, it just says that you have to have these numbers based on the population or this and that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so no allocation method ended up in Hillary winning in 2016, which was really stunning.
If everyone did proportional voting, he still wins enough of each state to have one.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I still think that sounds more fair to me.
It is.
Being from California, the winner-take-all system has always struck me as really strange because it's a massive state. It is more or less a safe state for the most part. Like it's pretty much always going to vote Democrat or vote left in some sense. But because of the massive numbers of electoral votes that it has, I think it's the second in the country. Does Texas have more? Maybe California has more than Texas. I can't remember.
No, California is more, 55.
Okay. It makes California a more vigorous place for candidates to campaign.
Right.
And that's not really fair. Like candidates should feel the need to solicit the support of every state in the country.
Agreed.
They shouldn't be able to say, well, if I got Texas and California, I can ignore everybody else. Like,
right.
You know what I mean?
Right. So on this point, I remember one of the criticisms of Hillary's campaign that she basically campaigned in the main bigger states with the largest electoral vote count, like New York and California and the like leaning Democrat ones, and ignored smaller states like Ohio. Or Ohio is not small in electoral votes, but it's not 55; it's maybe 29.
Yeah.
So that's where Trump like basically got a few of those Midwestern states to flip the election towards him. So even though Hillary did campaign this way, it still didn't help her, because you do need to campaign in every state. But definitely the proportional is more fair, and it would eliminate the like people say, abolish the electoral college because it's not fair. That would be moot at this point, because it's based on the number of votes you get in that state.
Yeah.
How many you get. So we're getting a couple of more questions here. Muhammad Masoud, Bitcoin cannot be printed because you have to mine the coins. And this is a process on the computer. You use your electricity and your computers. So you have the hardware and you have to pay the electric company to produce the Bitcoins. So government cannot control the production of Bitcoins, yet they are trying somehow to regulate it. And that was a question about Bitcoin. What is your view on that? So you're the expert here. You're the launch navigator of Bitcoins, not bombs.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that first, and then answer Muhammad's question.
Sure. I just got myself a certification. I am now a certified Bitcoin expert from the Bitcoin Consortium.
Wow.
So yeah, that's cool. I passed the test. I got a C+. Apparently that means I'm an expert.
Very nice.
He's exactly right. I was giving Bitcoin as an example of a non-governmental currency, which I think is the best way to soften the blow of the implosion of a fiat currency. Is for the layperson who can't influence policy, something that they can do is they can begin to diversify their assets in things outside of fiat currency. If they can get themselves involved in counter economic activities with alternative currencies, and that's gold and silver too. Like that's something that I've been an advocate for a long time. Is involve yourself in any sort of non-governmental currency. But I also think as a national policy, allowing that sort of thing and embracing that sort of thing is going to be a huge economic boon, because it means that your economy is more robust against the negative effects of quantitative easing. The other thing that a layperson can do, and we don't really talk about this a lot because libertarians don't really talk about workers' rights very much. But if you are a wage employee and you ever have an opportunity to get into a wage negotiation with your boss about your wage, you should always be talking about a standard of living increase. You should include inflation data in your negotiation with your employer, if only to educate him, but also because in most experienced business people, this is something that they understand, and that's a very hard thing for them to deny. And so the fact that you come into a wage negotiation expressing to your employer that you understand that your wage is being deflated by inflation, it means that you're going to be more likely to get a wage increase, even if it's just some standard percentage to counteract the deflation of the value of your wage. And so, yeah, if you're aware of this topic, bring it into your wage negotiations with your employer.
Very good, very good. So how do you see the regulation attempts of Bitcoin? What's your take on that?
Oh man, I've stayed out of it. I want them to stay out of it. This is one of the reasons why I don't really keep very much Bitcoin anymore. I still have a website where people can use it to buy my merchandise, but honestly, like nobody has spent Bitcoin on my website in probably 4 or 5 years, because nobody uses Bitcoin as a currency anymore. Bitcoin is this like behemoth where the transaction fees are too high and the network is too slow, and it's become this strange sort of speculative investment for people that want a regulated cryptocurrency and they want to comply and pay their taxes and get involved in whatever sort of financial security system that the government wants to come up with. There are literally hundreds. There's a virtual unlimited number of alternative currencies that are based on blockchain technology that are less known and less regulated and just as viable. And they still operate the way that Bitcoin did in the beginning, where the transaction fees are low and the transactions occur quickly and they're confirmed right away. And they still fluctuate. It's just like watching a precious metals market, right? But instead of a precious metals market where the industrial uses of those metals are going to influence the way that the prices fluctuate between metals, the arbitrage between metals. In the cryptocurrency space, it's the features of the cryptocurrency. And so it's essentially like different developers are competing with one another to provide the features that users want in their currency. And a lot of them are very personalized. Like it's very experimental. And I wish I knew more examples of it, but I haven't really followed the news in the space very much, but it's an exciting thing to get into. And I just, I wish that it had stayed much more unregulated. But Bitcoin at this point it's called Know Your Customer regulations. So if you get into any of the large Bitcoin exchanges and things, they're going to want your tax ID and they're going to want your name and blood sample and fingerprint and retina eye retina scan.
So if someone wants to know more and get in contact with you, do you have a website or a method of contact?
Yeah, I'm still an operator at bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can reach me at Davi, D-A-V-I, at bitcoinnotbombs.com. I will most likely direct you to somebody better able to field your questions than I am. I am primarily the graphic designer in that space. But I've been a witness to the development of the cryptocurrency space, and as an observer, as an investigative journalist more than anything. And so I have a strong sort of layperson's understanding of it.
Very good, very good. So if people wants to speak with you, it's Davi at bitcoinsnotbombs.com.
Singular, bitcoinnotbombs.com.
bitcoinnotbombs.com. Excellent. Yeah. So speaking of graphic design, you designed this amazing logo of Vantage Points, and I want people to understand what it is and what is the idea behind it. I'm going to try to share screen to put it on a bigger screen. Let's see what we can do. I'm using StreamYard, and it's awesome. It's much better than Zoom, but it's not yet easy to manage. So let me see. How can I bring? I guess I'm going to share the screen. Give me 1 second. Share screen. Screen sharing. Okay. And what are we doing here? Not this. Application window. Okay. Here. Okay. So now, here's the logo. So Davi, go ahead and explain the logo to us.
There's a lot going on here. So, I mean, first off, the name is it's got multiple sorts of ideas. Vantage Points, in a sense, means you and I each have our own vantage point. We're bouncing ideas off of one another. It's a talk show. It's a news broadcast. And that's sort of the explicit meaning. But the other thing is just sort of like what we were talking about earlier, what I was saying about reality tunnels, that when people view the same reality through a different filter, through a different vantage point, they'll often perceive different things. And so for this logo, we started with an optical illusion where if you look at it from the left-hand side, it looks like 4 bars. But if you look at it from the right-hand side, it looks like 3 bars. And this is sort of one of the common optical illusions that people use in workshops and classrooms and things like that to explain this concept that people have different assumptions that they bring into their perception of reality. In this case, we took kind of a step further, and the color choice is really deliberate. So on the left-hand side, it's called CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And those are the primary ink colors of every piece of print media you've ever seen in your life, right? Whether it's comic books or magazines or posters or billboards or or whatever. They're all made up of everything that comes out of your desk printer at home. They're little points of those 4 colors mixed together to make all the colors in the rainbow. But if you're talking about your computer screen, or you're talking about old style televisions, like static televisions, they use a different color scheme. They use RGB, which is red, green, and blue, to make it's essentially another way of mixing all of the same colors. And the reason is, and I don't want to blow your mind too much, but color is just a theory, okay? There's no scientific basis for the existence of color.
Okay, David, easy on us, please.
No, so when I was in art school, there's a course called color theory. And the reason is because wavelengths are a scientific measurement, but the colors that we attribute to those wavelengths and the way that those colors present in our brain is a little more amorphous, okay? And so there's 2 different ways that the color is created. Pigment color is the way that paint mixes. And so if you mix all of the paints together, all the colors of paint together, you'll get black or sort of brown, right? And that's the way pigment color mixes. Mm-hmm. Light is the opposite. If you get spotlights of every color and you shine them all together, you don't get black, you get white. Mm. And so this is like, it's a way that the optic nerve processes light with additive and reductive hue, that light reduces and pigment adds. And so to get a print color, you have to use the CMYK system, but to get a light color, you have to use the RGB system. And so it's the point is that all colors are all of these things all of the time. It's just a matter of which vantage point you're measuring from. It's like metric versus standard. Mm-hmm. And so it was a way of saying that this is the way that color works, that if you look at color one way, it's made of 3 parts. If you look at color another way, it's made of 4 parts. But also, because we're talking about this in the terms of a news company, we're also talking about publishing in both of these methods, that in some sense you want to put out print material that's printed in CMYK and you want to be print media. And in some sense you want to be video and audio and news media that puts out on television screens and computer screens, and in that sense is publishing in Roy G. Biv or red, green, blue. And so I don't know. There's like a lot piled into it. I could geek out about this forever because I went to art school for this stuff. Right. But I don't know how much color theory is interesting to the general audience.
No, but I mean, it's suffice to say that when we thought about this, we thought about a media outlet, both print and on screen. So we have on the left
is what that one is. The right hand side is projection, and the left hand side is print.
Exactly. So RGB on the right, CMYK on the left, and they merge together in the optical illusion, signifying the different vantage points that people look at the same thing, but they come up with different conclusions because they're looking from different vantage points. Yeah. Hence, this show is about bringing those different vantage points towards better understanding and more common ground.
Yeah, this is another like epistemological point I think about the whole show, is that if you go through your entire life in your reality tunnel and you only look at reality through your filter, you're wrong. There's no question about it. You've made a series of incredible mistakes where you've misperceived things. Right. And so to get an accurate perception of reality, or at least a more accurate perception of reality, you absolutely need the vantage points of other people to confirm and disconfirm the filter that you're using.
Exactly. And you might have missed something,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other point that I want to raise is the point, the dot above the eye, has those arcs and signifying the broadcast or the
it's like radio waves or Wi-Fi signal or
exactly
something like that.
So the logo is really, really, really well thought out and amazingly produced by Davi. So if someone wants to do a logo or some other graphic work, how do they contact you, Davi?
The same email address is fine. I don't really have a website specifically for my graphic design work. That's really something I just do by word of mouth for clients that know me and have known me for a long time. So, so Davi at bitcoinnotbombs.com would be fine. Other logos people might know is Bitcoin Not Bombs. I did that logo and it was sort of famous. I actually I've been invited to speak about graphic design at a variety of Bitcoin conferences because of that logo. Andreas Antonopoulos is a famous person in the Bitcoin space. I did his logo. I don't know. It's something I've been doing for years.
And I watched your presentation about the logos at one of those conferences, and it blew my mind. Like it's really amazing. How do you take something you think is insignificant, but it has so much value in it, and it conveys so much as well. And so anyway, so if you want Davi's amazing work, contact him at the email Davi, D-A-V-Y. V-I, D-A-V-I at bitcoinnotbombs.com.
Sure.
Awesome. And this is the story of the Vantage Points logo.
It's one of my favorites. There's so much. The thing for me that marks a really good logo is if it appears simple at first glance, and then the more you look at it, the more complex it becomes, and the more connotation and implication that it has.
Right. Very well. I think we have another comment from Maria while we were talking about the logo. It is a coherent position because it has to be a stepwise dismantling and reinstituting free monetary choice. It will certainly be a fight all along the way. Talking about Bitcoins, I think she's talking about Joe Jorgensen, because I said that Joe Jorgensen's position was incoherent if she says that she wants to audit the Fed and then abolish the Fed. And yeah, I suppose you audit the purpose of auditing the Fed. It's like, I don't know. For me, I got into that movement when "End the Fed" was the slogan, and then they kind of walked it back, and they're like, no, we want to audit the Fed. And I think that the reason for that was that they thought that more people would be on board if they actually got into the nitty gritty of it and saw the real numbers, which are right now, I don't even think a matter of public record. And so, yeah, it is a step in the strategy of abolishing the Fed. But if you're saying your position is to abolish the Fed, I don't know. I guess I don't get the sense. I don't want to badmouth Joe Jorgensen too much because I was actually really pleased with her winning the primary, and I was really optimistic about her campaign. But this is an aesthetic criticism, right? Not a principled one. Right.
She seems as if she has just now begun to come into her own as a public speaker, and so some of her appearances and some of her speeches, they feel unpolished, and they feel a little bit like she's trying to win the crowd over with rhetoric they know that they'll like, but maybe she's not completely versed on the subject of, which, like, that's okay, because, like, it's sort of like Gary Johnson's response to being asked a question he didn't necessarily know the answer to was to joke about it and to kind of make a fool of himself. And so the fact that she retreats into comfortable rhetoric is probably better. But I just think it's not a subject that she knows as well as she knows the rest of the libertarian platform. And so she just puts out both of these bumper sticker answers.
Right. And I think it's also lack of resources, of course, compared to the big two. None of the other parties have any resources to polish themselves and have the like advisors and media and all this stuff. So it takes time to build up and get into gear, basically, in the election cycle. So we're coming to a close of the hour. This, like, I can't believe we've been speaking for an hour. It seemed like we just started a minute ago. I hope that you're able to come again as many times and as much time as you're able to for the rest until the election.
Hopefully I'll have a better studio by next time.
It works. It works. So again, for the viewers, we will be having a live nightly show from 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific for an hour every night until election night, where we will have 2, 3, or 4 hours, depending on how sleepy I get. So we'll play it by ear for election night. But hopefully you can join us. You can share the message. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can like the Facebook page and share our content. We are not supported by anyone whatsoever. Davi gave me a good rate for the logo, and I did the rest. That's the end of the support of this channel. So your support is what keeps us going. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Davi, for joining me on short notice. Looking forward to having you again in the next few days. This has been Vantage Points with Hisham and Maligi. There are hashtags and there is a hashtag. This is the hashtag. Good night, America.